The final radio calls from missing park rangers. You clicked on this video to hear the final radio calls from park rangers who disappeared, and you're going to hear them. But there's something you should know first. Most people think park rangers are the safest people in the wilderness. They know the trails, they know the animals, they know what to do when something goes wrong. So when an experienced ranger suddenly radios in, sounding confused, then afraid, and then disappears without a trace, it challenges everything we believe about being safe in the woods. In several of these cases, the final voice heard over the radio was calm at first. Then something changed. A strange sound, a warning, a sentence that didn't make sense, and then nothing. No second call, no clear explanation, and in some cases, no ranger was ever found. So as you listen to these final transmissions, pay attention to the exact moment their voices change. Because that may be the closest anyone ever came to knowing what happened to them. Park rangers are supposed to be the people who know what to do when everyone else is lost. They know the trails. They know which roads disappear under snow. They know where rivers become dangerous, where animals usually move, and which parts of the forest can turn deadly after sunset. When a hiker gets lost, a ranger goes looking. When someone is injured, a ranger answers the call. When people panic, the ranger is usually the calm voice telling them what to do next. And maybe that is why the disappearance of a ranger feels so different. Because suddenly, the person who normally brings people home becomes the person everyone else is searching for. And sometimes, the only clue left behind is a voice on a radio, a normal check-in. Then another call, a strange detail, a pause that lasts a little too long. A voice that sounds different from the one heard only minutes earlier, and then silence. It is tempting to hear stories like these and immediately imagine something impossible. But the wilderness does not need anything supernatural to become terrifying. A fall can happen in seconds, weather can change, a wrong turn can become 5 wrong turns, cold can change the way someone thinks, an animal can force a person off a trail, and another human being can sometimes be more dangerous than anything living in the woods. But there are cases and stories that remain disturbing because the final moments seem to contain a warning that nobody fully understands. A ranger sees something, hears something, changes direction, calls dispatch, and then vanishes. So before we try to understand those final calls, there is something important to understand first. Danger in the wilderness does not always arrive with a warning. Sometimes it begins on a completely ordinary day. Imagine a ranger beginning a normal patrol. It is still daylight. The trail is familiar. The weather looks manageable. The radio works. The vehicle is parked exactly where it should be. Nothing about the morning suggests that anything unusual is going to happen, and that may be the most dangerous part, because most people imagine a serious emergency beginning with something obvious. A scream, a storm, an animal attack, a sudden injury, but real trouble often begins with something small. A ranger notices fresh footprints leaving the trail. Maybe there is smoke coming from an area where camping is not allowed. Maybe a gate that should be closed is open. Maybe a vehicle is parked somewhere visitors are not supposed to be. Or maybe there is simply a sound deeper in the trees. To you or me, the smart choice might seem obvious. Walk away, call for help, do not investigate. But a ranger has a different job. That strange sound could be a lost child. Those footprints could belong to an injured hiker. The smoke could mean someone has started a fire. The vehicle could belong to a person who needs help. So instead of moving away from the unknown, the ranger moves toward it. That is the strange trap of experience. The knowledge that keeps a ranger safe can also give them a reason to move closer to something dangerous. They have solved problems before. They have walked these trails before. They have handled frightened animals, confused visitors, bad weather, and accidents. There is no reason to believe this time will be different. Not yet, and that is why the first radio call can sound completely calm. The first call is almost boring. A location, a weather update, a short report, everything normal. The ranger tells dispatch where they are and where they are going next. Dispatch answers. Nothing in the voice suggests fear. Nothing suggests an emergency. If that radio call were the end of the story, nobody would remember it. Then several minutes pass. The radio comes alive again. This time the ranger asks a question. Is anyone else working in this part of the park? Dispatch checks. No. No other ranger is supposed to be there. No maintenance crew. No scheduled team. The ranger pauses. Maybe they mentioned seeing movement ahead. Maybe someone crossed between the trees. Maybe the ranger heard a voice but could not understand the words. The important thing is not what they saw. Not yet. The important thing is that their way of speaking changes. The first call was simple: location, condition, plan. The second call is shorter. There are pauses between sentences. Dispatch asks if everything is okay. The ranger says yes, and that answer almost makes the situation worse. Because if nothing is wrong, why ask whether someone else is out there? Dispatch gives the ranger the information they requested. Nobody should be in that area. And now one question begins hanging over the entire conversation. If nobody is supposed to be there, who did the ranger see? There is no answer. The ranger decides to check and continues forward. Leaving a trail does not feel dangerous immediately. At first, the trail is still behind you. You can turn around and see it. You walk 50 yards. Then another 50. Maybe you follow footprints. Maybe you hear movement. Maybe you are trying to get a better view. Then you look back again. The trail is harder to see. Another 100 yards changes everything. Trees begin looking the same. Small hills block your view. Brush becomes thicker. The ground becomes uneven. And the landmarks you thought you would remember begin disappearing. Most people think getting lost happens because someone makes one enormous mistake. Usually, it does not. It happens through small decisions, just a little farther, just around the next group of trees, just down this slope, just another minute. Each decision feels harmless, until you finally turn around and realize you are no longer completely sure which direction leads back. A ranger may still have a much better sense of direction than an ordinary visitor. But knowing an area is not the same as seeing through trees, and being approximately sure of your location is very different from knowing exactly where you are. Now clouds begin moving in. Wind picks up. The light changes. The forest that looked open 20 minutes ago starts feeling closed. And sound becomes confusing. A branch breaking far away may sound close. A voice can travel through a valley. Movement on one side can seem like it came from the other. The ranger radios again. But this time, dispatch hears something different. Not panic. Not yet. Hesitation. And now the ranger is no longer talking about where they are going. They are talking about something that may be watching them. Fear does not always sound like screaming. Sometimes fear sounds like someone trying very hard not to sound afraid. The ranger begins speaking more quietly. The long explanations disappear. Dispatch asks a question. The ranger answers with 2 or 3 words. Another question. Another short answer. Dispatch asks whether assistance is needed. The ranger says no. Think about that for a moment. If the ranger is uncomfortable, why refuse help? Maybe they believe they are overreacting. Maybe they still think the situation is under control. Maybe they do not want another team traveling several miles because of something that could turn out to be nothing. Or maybe they do not want whatever is nearby to hear them asking for help. The ranger reports that the movement is gone. Whatever they saw between the trees is no longer there. That should make the situation better. Instead, it makes it worse. Because now, they cannot see where it went. There is another sound. Leaves, a branch, footsteps. The ranger stops talking. Dispatch asks them to repeat the last message. Static moves across the radio. The ranger answers, but only part of the sentence is clear. Something about hearing movement again. Dispatch asks from which direction. Another pause. Then the ranger says something that does not answer the question. Something like, it keeps changing. Changing direction, changing distance, changing position. Nobody knows. Dispatch calls again. But before the ranger can explain, the signal drops. A lost radio signal in the wilderness is not automatically an emergency. Mountains block signals. Deep valleys create dead zones. Trees, distance, and terrain can make communication unreliable. So dispatch tries again. No answer. They wait. Call again. Nothing. Another channel. Still nothing. Under normal conditions, that might not be alarming. But this time, the ranger had already reported something unusual. And once you know that, every minute of silence feels different. Another ranger is asked to attempt contact. No response. Someone confirms where the missing ranger parked. Daylight is fading. Temperatures will drop. And now the questions begin multiplying. Is the ranger simply out of radio range? Are they injured? Are they moving? Are they lost? Did the person they thought they saw actually exist? And if so, where are they now? A team is sent toward the ranger's last known area. The first goal is simple. Find the vehicle, confirm the ranger did not return without contacting dispatch. The team reaches the parking area. The vehicle is still there. And suddenly, this is no longer just a radio problem. The vehicle does not look like the scene of an emergency. There is no broken glass, no obvious damage, no clear sign of a struggle. It simply looks like a ranger parked, got out, and expected to come back. That detail matters, because people who plan to disappear usually behave differently from people who expect to return after a short patrol. Searchers check the ground. They look for footprints, bent grass, disturbed leaves, anything that might show which direction the ranger traveled. In some places, tracks are easy to follow. In others, they vanish almost immediately. Rock holds no footprint. Dry leaves shift. Wind changes the surface. Rain can destroy hours of evidence in minutes. Searchers move toward the route the ranger most likely took. They know the starting point. They have an approximate area for the radio calls. That sounds useful. But put those 2 points inside a huge forest, and suddenly there are thousands of places a person could be. A narrow ravine, a creek, dense brush, a steep slope. A fallen tree, an old structure, a place hidden only 20 feet from the trail. Teams continue deeper into the area. Then someone spots something. It belongs to the ranger. A piece of equipment. But it is not where anyone expected to find it. Maybe it is a flashlight, maybe a notebook, a hat, part of a radio, a backpack. Whatever it is, the same question appears immediately. Why is it here? Experienced people usually do not throw away useful equipment without a reason, especially when daylight is disappearing. So the possibilities begin. The ranger could have dropped it accidentally. They could have removed it while moving quickly. Maybe they were injured. Maybe they were running. Maybe they left something heavy behind because they believed they could move faster without it. Or maybe somebody else moved it. That last possibility is the one people remember, but it is also the easiest one to imagine without evidence. Searchers cannot afford to choose a theory simply because it is frightening. They expand outward from the item. More people enter the area. Every direction is checked. But there is no ranger, no clear trail, and now the object creates 2 problems instead of solving one. If something happened here, where did the ranger go? And if nothing happened here, why was the equipment left behind? Dogs may follow a scent for some distance. Then the trail becomes weak. Maybe it crosses water. Maybe too many people have walked through. Maybe weather has changed the ground. Night passes. By morning, dozens of people may be searching. Eventually, hundreds may become involved. And somehow, one person can still remain hidden. This is where many people struggle with missing person cases. If dozens of trained searchers enter an area, how can they not find one person? It feels impossible until you stand inside a real forest. A human body is small, very small. Tall grass can hide someone, brush can hide someone. A fallen tree can block a person from view. A searcher can walk 10 or 15 feet away from an injured person and never see them. From the air, thick trees can make the ground almost invisible. Rocks create shadows, water moves objects, rain removes tracks. And if the missing person is still moving, the problem becomes much harder. Search teams work from probability. They ask where a normal person would go. But someone who is frightened, injured, cold, or confused may stop behaving normally. An injured person may crawl under something for protection. Someone who thinks they are being followed may hide. A confused person may walk directly away from search teams without realizing it. And experience does not make a human body immune to these problems. Pain changes judgment. Cold changes judgment. Fear changes judgment. Lack of sleep changes judgment. Darkness can make a familiar place feel completely unknown. All of these explanations are possible. But they become much harder to accept emotionally when the ranger's final calls suggest one more detail. They believe someone else was nearby. Now imagine another evening patrol. Different ranger, different area. The service road is quiet. Most visitors have already left. The ranger notices something small, fresh footprints, a damaged sign. Maybe a gate has been moved. Nothing immediately dangerous. The ranger radios dispatch and asks whether another employee is somewhere ahead. The answer comes back, no, nobody should be there. The ranger continues. A few minutes later, they see movement. A person-shaped figure near the edge of the trees. The ranger calls out, no answer. The figure moves away. The ranger follows for a short distance, then stops. Because now there is a sound behind them. A branch breaks. The ranger turns. Nothing. This is where fear often begins. Not when you can see the danger, but when you cannot. If you can see a bear, at least you know where the bear is. If you can see another person, you can watch what they are doing. But when the thing that worries you disappears, your mind has to guess. The ranger begins moving back. Dispatch is told that someone may be following. The instruction is simple. Return to the vehicle. Do not continue investigating. The ranger answers, I'm already heading back. Static interrupts. Then dispatch hears breathing, not running, just faster than before. The ranger suddenly stops walking. For several seconds, nothing is said. Then a whisper comes through. I can't see them anymore. Uncertainty can frighten us more than danger itself. When the danger has a shape, the brain has something to understand. Animal, person, fire, storm. But a sound without a source creates possibilities, and the mind fills the empty space. The ranger hears movement. Maybe it is an animal, maybe another person, maybe only branches moving in the wind. But fear changes attention. Normal sounds become important. A falling pine cone can sound like a footstep. An animal moving through leaves can sound human. A shadow becomes a figure. That does not mean the ranger imagined everything. Sometimes fear exists because something is genuinely wrong. That is the terrible problem. From a radio recording, we cannot see the difference. The ranger decides not to return by exactly the same path. Maybe they believe someone is waiting there. Maybe they choose a shortcut. Maybe they know a service road lies somewhere beyond the trees. In the moment, it feels logical, but one decision can completely change where searchers later look. And now the ranger is moving away from the route dispatch believes they are using. Another transmission comes through. This one will be the last clear message. Dispatch asks for a location. The ranger gives the nearest landmark they recognize. A creek, a slope, a trail marker, something approximate. Dispatch tells them to stay on the radio. The ranger says they can still hear movement, then static. Dispatch asks for the message again. A broken answer comes through. Only a few words are understandable, then silence. Repeat your last transmission. Nothing. Another burst of static. The ranger returns. This time the voice sounds different. Not uncertain, alarmed. There may be only a few words. Hold on. Or, someone's here. Then the connection dies. Dispatch calls immediately. No response. Again, nothing. Another ranger calls. Nothing. Seconds become minutes. And this is the moment the radio becomes frightening, because the device itself may still be working. Dispatch can keep transmitting. The signal can continue traveling through the forest, but the person carrying the radio is no longer answering. Vehicles arrive at different trailheads. Flashlights begin moving between trees. Names are shouted into the darkness. Every searcher understands the same thing. The ranger might be close. They might be injured only a few hundred yards away. So people listen after every shout. Nothing. Then another sound somewhere in the forest. Everyone stops. It turns out to be wind. Or an animal. Or another searcher. Night makes everything smaller. During the day, you can see hundreds of feet ahead. At night, your world becomes whatever fits inside the beam of a flashlight. Everything outside that circle is unknown. Searchers also remember something else. The missing ranger believed another person was nearby. Was that person real? Is that person still in the area? Nobody knows. A possible footprint is found. Then another. But the ground changes. The trail disappears. Rain begins. Or wind moves through the forest. Evidence becomes harder to read. Near sunrise, the feeling of the search changes. At first, everyone hoped the ranger had simply lost communication. Now, hours have passed. This is a missing person case. Then another clue is found. It seems to show that the ranger changed direction. And nobody knows why. There are many reasons an experienced ranger might leave the expected path. Maybe they were following someone. Maybe they heard an injured animal. Maybe they tried to reach higher ground for a better radio signal. Maybe they believed danger was behind them. Maybe they saw a shortcut. Or maybe they were becoming disoriented. The problem with a wrong direction is that it rarely feels wrong immediately. Imagine believing a road is 1 mile east. You walk east, but you are slightly wrong. Instead of walking toward the road, you move almost parallel to it. After 20 minutes, you think, I should be there soon. So you keep going. Turning back feels like throwing away the progress you already made. Another 20 minutes passes. Now you are farther away than before. Darkness makes the problem worse. Do you stay where you are? Or keep moving toward what you believe is safety? Both choices can feel correct. But not every strange ranger disappearance begins with a person in the trees. Sometimes it begins with something even simpler. A light where no light should be. It is late. A ranger is checking a quiet section of parkland when they notice a small light between the trees. That area should be empty. Camping is not allowed there. The ranger watches. The light moves. The first explanation is harmless. Maybe visitors are lost. Maybe someone entered a closed area without realizing it. Maybe someone needs help. The ranger radios the location and begins approaching. Then the light disappears. The ranger waits. Nothing. A moment later, it appears again, but now it seems farther away. This is a powerful trap for the human mind. When something does not make sense, we want an explanation. The ranger moves closer. The ground becomes harder. The trail fades. Dispatch asks for an update. The ranger says they are still trying to find whoever is carrying the light. Then comes another detail. Voices. The ranger can hear people talking. They call out. No answer. The light disappears again. Silence. At this point, the ranger decides to turn back. That should end the problem. But several minutes later, another call comes through. The ranger sounds confused. The place around them does not look the way they expected. How can someone familiar with an area become confused inside it? Because darkness removes landmarks. A ridge becomes a shadow. A trail becomes a strip of dirt identical to everything around it. Then the ranger stops speaking. A few seconds pass. The radio comes alive. I can see the light again. Distance at night is extremely difficult to judge. A small light across a valley can look like it is only a few hundred feet away. Headlights may appear and disappear through trees. A person carrying a flashlight can move without the person ever becoming visible. Even reflections can make the direction confusing. so the light does not need to be mysterious. But to the ranger in that moment, it may seem close enough to reach. They move again. Radio calls become weaker. Dispatch tells the ranger to stop. Stay where you are. Wait for another team. The ranger agrees. Then several minutes pass. Another transmission arrives. And somehow the ranger has moved. Why? Maybe the light appeared again. Maybe they heard somebody calling. Maybe they thought staying still was dangerous. Or maybe they believed they had finally recognized the route back. Nobody listening from miles away can see what the ranger sees. They only know the ranger is no longer where they were supposed to remain. The transmission weakens, then disappears, and that becomes the last place anyone can confidently connect to the ranger. A search works best when people have a clear last location. But if the missing ranger was moving after the final reliable call, the possible area expands quickly. Teams begin with trails, then creeks, then slopes, roads, drainage areas, places where an injured person might seek shelter. Searchers look for anything that does not belong. A bright piece of clothing, a backpack, a reflective patch, metal, equipment. Aircraft may search from above when conditions allow, but trees hide the ground. Volunteers arrive. Co-workers search. Days begin passing. At first, every new team brings hope. Maybe they will notice what the previous team missed. Maybe the ranger is just beyond the next ridge. Maybe someone will find fresh tracks. Then something is discovered, signs that a person passed through. But there is a problem. Nobody can prove those signs belong to the missing ranger. A clue should reduce possibilities. This one creates more. The search continues. The family waits. Co-workers wait. Dispatchers remember the final conversation. The wilderness gives them pieces, but none of those pieces form a complete story. When someone disappears under strange circumstances, people naturally search for an equally strange explanation. But sometimes the worst possibility is much simpler: a fall. One bad step on wet rock. A head injury, a broken leg, a sudden medical problem, falling into fast water, becoming trapped somewhere that cannot be seen from the trail. A small emergency can create a chain reaction. A ranger falls and injures a leg. They try to find another route. The route takes them farther from the search area. Cold sets in. Thinking becomes slower. The ranger makes another poor decision. By the time search teams arrive, the place everyone expects them to be is no longer where they actually are. There is no villain, no impossible event, no hidden force, just several ordinary problems happening in the worst possible order. And maybe that is more frightening, because the wilderness does not need to chase you. It does not need to want anything from you. It only needs you to make one mistake at the wrong time. But there is another explanation that cannot always be ignored. Another person. Rangers sometimes work alone in places where there are no witnesses. Most of the people they meet are ordinary visitors, but their work can also bring them into contact with trespassers, illegal hunters, people damaging protected land, individuals hiding where they are not supposed to be, angry visitors, people whose behavior is unpredictable. Most of these encounters end without violence. But isolation changes risk. A ranger may approach because the situation looks harmless. One person near a closed trail, someone camping illegally, a vehicle where it should not be. The ranger does not know what that person wants. That may explain why some radio reports sound vague. They may not want the person nearby to hear them requesting help. They may still be trying to understand whether there is a real threat. And if the ranger said someone was following them, human involvement becomes difficult to ignore. But it is important not to turn possibility into fact. A missing person does not automatically mean murder. An abandoned item does not prove a struggle. A strange radio call does not prove somebody attacked the ranger. Without evidence, these remain theories. And this is where the radio becomes dangerous, because it gives us just enough information to imagine the rest. Knowing the ending changes the beginning. Think about a normal radio call. A ranger pauses before answering. Static interrupts. They sound tired. If that ranger returns safely that evening, nobody thinks about it again. But if the ranger disappears, the exact same recording sounds completely different. The pause feels important. The static feels threatening. A normal sentence suddenly sounds like a warning. Our minds begin searching backward. We already know something bad happened, so we start looking for the moment when the bad thing began. Maybe that moment is really there. Maybe it is not. This matters because missing person stories can easily become legends. A normal sound gets described as a scream. A broken sentence becomes a mysterious final message. Years later, people repeat details that may never have been part of the original event. So we have to separate what we know from what we imagine. But even after doing that, one thing can remain difficult to ignore: the human voice. Because sometimes you do not need to know exactly what someone is seeing to recognize that they are afraid. Training helps people control fear. It does not remove fear. In fact, experience can sometimes make a person more afraid. A beginner might hear an unusual sound and ignore it. A ranger may know exactly what that sound could mean. A beginner might see clouds and think rain is coming. A ranger may know that a dangerous storm is minutes away. A visitor may step onto unstable ground without recognizing it. A ranger may understand the risk immediately. So when an experienced person suddenly changes tone, people listening later naturally pay attention. What did they recognize? Weather, animal behavior, dangerous ground, another person? We cannot know from voice alone. That is the limitation of the radio. It gives us sound without sight. One side of a conversation, no complete picture, no camera showing what stands beyond the trees. Just a voice, and once that voice stops, everyone else has to build the final moments from fragments. Searchers are not only fighting distance, they are fighting time, weather, darkness, terrain, and their own assumptions. A search has to begin somewhere. Teams check places where an injured person is most likely to go. Near the trail, near water, near shelter, near the vehicle, along the expected route. Those choices make sense. But what if the missing ranger did something that did not make sense? What if fear caused them to run in the opposite direction? What if an injury made them seek shelter in a place nobody could see? What if they believed they were walking toward the road, but were actually walking away? Searchers can make almost every decision correctly and still miss one critical detail. That is why people can sometimes remain hidden inside areas that have already been searched. A searcher does not literally see every inch of ground. Branches block vision, rocks block vision, holes, ravines, and vegetation create blind spots. So when people say they searched everywhere, it sounds final. But in wilderness, everywhere can be almost impossible. A building can protect evidence. A forest destroys it. Wind moves leaves. Rain washes away tracks. Snow covers objects. Rivers carry things downstream. Animals move equipment. Plants grow over items. Every day changes the scene. A footprint that is obvious the first morning may be invisible after a storm. A backpack hidden beneath brush could remain unseen for years. This makes old wilderness disappearances especially difficult. Time does not freeze the place. It erases it. And this also means that missing evidence should not automatically be treated as suspicious. A missing footprint does not mean someone cleaned the area. An object found far away does not automatically mean someone placed it there. Nature moves things. People move things accidentally during searches. Animals move things. Weather changes things. That is why unanswered cases stay unanswered. The biggest mystery is sometimes not the strange evidence people discover. It is how little useful evidence exists at all. We often hear the phrase, vanished without a trace. It creates an image of someone simply disappearing. One second they are there, the next second they are gone. But that is rarely what the phrase actually means. Usually there was a trace, a vehicle, a radio call, footprints, a known starting location. Then the useful evidence stopped. That is very different from a person literally vanishing. The ranger may have lived for hours after the final transmission. They may have continued walking, changed direction, crossed water, become injured later. The final radio call may feel like the final moment because it is the last moment we can hear. But the last time someone is heard is not necessarily the last important thing that happened to them. And that possibility changes the entire search, because the ranger could have traveled much farther than anyone expected. That may be why final radio calls feel so disturbing. They sound like endings. But for the missing person, they may have only been the beginning of what happened next. There are several possibilities. The ranger may have continued moving until the terrain blocked the radio. Without communication, they became lost. Or maybe they fell. An injury could have made it impossible to reach the radio. Maybe they entered water. A river or hidden drop could move a person far from the place searchers expected. Maybe another person was involved. Maybe the ranger believed they were in danger and deliberately hid. Or maybe fear itself caused decisions they normally would never make. The important thing is that these possibilities do not have to happen separately. One can cause another. The ranger becomes frightened, leaves the normal trail, moves quickly, falls, the radio breaks. They cannot return. A chain of ordinary events can create a mystery that later looks impossible. And without finding the missing ranger, every theory faces the same problem. There is no final piece. No one can point to one explanation and prove, this is what happened. And that uncertainty is exactly why these stories survive. There is a reason missing ranger stories disturb people more than many other wilderness stories. Rangers represent safety. When visitors are lost, rangers know the way. When something goes wrong, rangers are the people expected to understand the situation. So when one disappears, a comforting belief breaks. If the expert can become lost, what does experience really protect us from? It is like hearing about a firefighter trapped by fire, or a lifeguard lost at sea. The person trained to rescue others becomes the person needing rescue. That reversal stays in the mind, because we want skill to guarantee survival. We want experience to create control. We want to believe that if we learn enough, prepare enough, and stay calm enough, there will always be a way out. But nature does not offer that guarantee. Experience improves the chances. It does not create certainty. The wilderness never promises that knowledge will always be enough. Now think back to the pattern. The first radio call is calm, routine. The ranger knows where they are. The second call contains uncertainty, a question, a detail that does not fit. The third becomes shorter, more pauses, less information. And the final call contains urgency. Maybe fear, maybe confusion. The radio calls cannot tell us the entire story, but they can show one thing. Something changed. The ranger stopped behaving as if this were an ordinary patrol. What caused that change? That is the center of the mystery. Who did they see? What did they hear? Why did they leave the expected route? Why did the signal disappear? Why was equipment found somewhere unexpected? Why did the trail end? Each question feels like it should have an answer, but sometimes the only available answer is another question. And sometimes the most important moment in a final radio conversation is not what someone says. It is the moment they stop answering. Fear does not always begin loudly. Sometimes it is a pause, looking behind you, speaking more quietly, asking the same question twice, changing direction. A trained ranger may work hard to keep their voice controlled because panic helps nobody. So a calm voice does not necessarily mean a calm person. But we also have to be careful. A pause can simply be someone thinking. Static is just static. A broken signal is not automatically mysterious. A person can sound nervous without being in immediate danger. That uncertainty is what makes final recording so powerful. We hear fragments. The ranger experiences the full scene. They can see the trees, the ground, the movement. Whatever is happening outside the range of the radio, we cannot. And because we cannot see it, our minds begin building the missing picture. Sometimes the picture we imagine is worse than anything that may actually have happened. But sometimes reality is worse because it is completely ordinary. Imagine the final moments before the last transmission. The ranger still has training, still has knowledge, still has equipment. They have probably faced bad situations before. Yet something has changed. What could make an experienced ranger suddenly realize they are no longer in control? An injury? The terrain? Bad weather? An animal? Another person? A simple mistake that became impossible to correct? We do not need an impossible explanation. Nature is powerful enough on its own. But uncertainty keeps the question alive. Families wait for answers. Co-workers replay conversations. Searchers think about places they may have missed. Investigators work with incomplete information. And years later, people listening to the story are left with the same fragments. A location, a voice, a strange detail, static, then nothing. We want mysteries to end with a discovery, but real life does not always provide one. A ranger can begin the morning believing it will be another normal day. Check the trails, talk to visitors, watch the weather, inspect an area, radio dispatch, return before dark. There is no reason to think that one ordinary radio message could become the final, confirmed record of where they were, and that may be what makes these stories so difficult to forget. A sentence becomes important only because no later sentence exists. A routine check-in becomes evidence. A pause becomes something people replay. A burst of static becomes the dividing line between what is known and everything that comes after. But real missing person cases deserve something more than rumors. They deserve honesty. Mystery should never replace evidence. A dramatic theory may be interesting. That does not make it true. The wilderness already gives us enough real reasons for people to disappear. It can hide a trail, erase footprints, move objects, distort sound, destroy direction, turn familiar ground into unfamiliar ground after sunset. And sometimes a search can involve hundreds of people and still end without the one thing everyone wants: an answer. That may be the most frightening truth of all. Not that there must be something supernatural hidden between the trees. Not that every strange light or unexplained sound is something impossible, but that nature can be completely normal and still leave behind a mystery. A person can take one wrong step, choose one wrong direction, follow one sound, walk toward one light, leave a trail for what feels like only a minute, and suddenly the people searching for them are trying to reconstruct an entire story from a handful of clues: a parked vehicle, a piece of equipment, a few footprints, and a final radio transmission. We want an ending. We want searchers to reach the last location and find the missing ranger. We want investigators to discover exactly what happened. We want one theory to explain every strange detail, because uncertainty makes us uncomfortable. It leaves the story open. But sometimes there is no final explanation. The search teams eventually leave. The vehicles disappear from the trailheads. The flashlights are gone. The forest becomes quiet again. The same wind moves through the same trees. The same trail remains exactly where it was. Visitors eventually return. Most of them will never know that somewhere beyond that trail, people once searched through the night for someone who never came back. And somewhere in the records, there may still be a final transmission, a voice asking a question, a dispatcher asking for a location, a burst of static, then silence. So what do you think is the most likely explanation when an experienced ranger disappears after a strange final call? A simple accident? Disorientation? Another person? Or one small detail that searchers never discovered? Whatever the answer is, there is one fact that makes these stories impossible to forget. The person on the radio knew more about their final moments than anyone else ever would. And when their voice disappeared, that knowledge disappeared with them. Sometimes, after every search ends, every trail is checked and every theory is tested. The only thing left is the silence that followed the final call.